This is Ethan Griggs with another round of the 70s versus the 90s. And this round, it's a tie breaking round because after round two, it was 1-1 70s and 90s. But now we have the Poseidon Adventure versus Deep Rising. Now, this one was a toughie because, basic Hollywood fare. The Poseidon Adventure was a big movie of the 70s. It was like those disaster movies were really popular, like Airport and Earthquake and all kinds of shit. This was like the pinnacle, though. They're directed by Ronald Neame, who belongs to a group of directors who started out as cinematographers. He did all of David Lean's early films, mostly the ones that he did with Noel Coward, like Brief Encounter and the Blithe Spirit and all that other good stuff. But Ronald Neame, he's kind of a basic director. He was essentially a journeyman, whatever came along, but the kind of guy that can get these actors to hit their marks. The Poseidon Adventure, it boasts a spectacular cast. The late great Gene Hackman and a lot of other motherfuckers that are dead, like Ernest Borgnine and Shelley Winters and Stella Stevens. I don't know if she may still be alive. I don't know, but all these other, like, it's just a grand cast. You had Roddy McDowall, Red Buttons, Leslie Nielsen's the fucking captain, in a rare, like, serious role that we would see him in. But it's just, what's the big centerpiece is the special effects in this film were really amazing. Like, the ship flipping over on its upside down and shit, it's phenomenal. And the biggest thing about it for me, though, is how it shows how shitty people can be in a fucking tragedy, and then nobody wants to listen, but there's so many, like, the performances are great, but it's so heavy-handed at times, and it was co-written by one of the greatest, one of the most prolific writers of all time, Sterling Silliphant. Television, movies, dude wrote it all, But this one, I don't know. It had this was kind of basic, because most of the characters, they're superficial. It's more or less, these kind of actors are playing, the shit that they would normally play. You got Gene Hackman coming off of the French Connection, being a preacher that's kind of, on the edge of losing his faith and shit, and but really, really determined to help these people get out of this tragedy, and nobody wants to listen to him, and it's just one of those movies that's like kind of a staple of 70s cinema, of like what was popular at the time. It was a big hit of 72, but it's just I don't know. I don't really have, other than the special effects and the performances, the movie's pretty basic. Imagine it in the 72, it was exciting to see, but we move on to Deep Rising, written and directed by Stephen Sommers, who would go on to do films like The Mummy and Van Helsing. Now, Deep Rising is kind of like the Poseidon Adventure for people who felt that what the Poseidon Adventure lacked was sea monsters and mercenaries. And you know what? I kind of got to agree with them, because where the Poseidon Adventure is a basic survival story during a tragedy, Deep Rising is like just a fun monster movie. But there's the sequence, like the ship doesn't really sink, but it gets bumped by some sea monsters. And there's, when all the shit's disarray and stuff, it looked like shot for shot, fucking Poseidon Adventure, it's just amazing, but the special effects in the movie, kind of corny. You can kind of see the late 90s CGI shit, but knowing that, you can tell that the filmmakers know that because they go by the Jaws principle of don't show your monster right off the bat. They allude to it a lot. And, but the crazy thing about Deep Rising is the monster isn't even the worst one. Like, you expect the monster to just kill and maim, but the people are fucking shit-tacular. And just like the Poseidon Adventure, it boasts a phenomenal cast of people that were, regulars in 90s cinema. You got Treat Williams being a fucking badass, and I'm not a big Treat Williams fan, but he fucking crushes in this movie. Famke Jensen as a jewel thief, just looking hot as ever. And you got Wes Studi, who very rarely plays an asshole, and he plays it perfectly. And Kevin J. O'Connor, who you might know as Benny from The Mummy, he's like great comic relief, fucking silly as shit, but that's kind of the fucking point, because in a film like this, it's fun, and I think that's where, I might just give it to Deep Rising because it's more of a fun movie. I don't, the thing about, we're going to have this argument about cinema on whether it's a great movie, if it makes you feel good or it makes you feel bad. There's that old saying, I don't know if I think it was in a Bresson film, The Devil Probably, where as long as movies are depressing, life isn't. Well, I mean, if you're going to make a dark, bleak movie, at least do it fun and entertaining. There's ways of doing it. But, I think with the Poseidon Adventure, even the ending is so basic. And granted, Deep Rising has a basic ass ending too, but it's got one of the funniest ending lines because they end up on another island, or they end up on an island with potentially could be the fucking lost world essentially, and you got Treat Williams is going, "What now?" I'm like, it's pure cinema, because the whole point of this is because we can make arguments. The Poseidon Adventure, is great technically, for the performances and the special effects. But as a movie that I want to watch again, not really. Like, it's one of those movies that, to have experienced it in theaters, I'm sure it was fucking magical. But something like Deep Rising works perfectly fine in the theater or fucking on fucking streaming or fucking video, whatever the fuck you watch movies on. But it's just one of those, fuck it. The 90s break the tie. It's 2-1 90s. So Deep Rising wins this round. It's, like I said, not as tough as it was last round. But, you got two very basic directors. Ronald Neame, did a lot of mid movies. And Stephen Sommers, really good at making monster movies, entertaining popcorn fare. So, I mean, fuck it. Deep Rising wins this round, 2-1 90s. So, not much to really say about either one of these films. They didn't really they weren't earth shattering. These were like popcorn flicks for their respective decades. And, the 90s were better at doing blockbusters than the 70s were, in my opinion. And it could be being a child of the 90s. But there are some films in the 70s that just don't compare to the 90s, and same thing with the 90s. It's just different times, but it's amazing how similar a lot of these movies were for the time periods that they were made. And a lot of times it feels like the 90s were making up for the sins of the 70s, or also doing what the 70s couldn't do, and that, I think even in the early 70s, the true monsters were human beings, with Bogdanovich's Targets, that basically ushered in an era of cinema where you've got Boris Karloff, who, frightened millions of people with fucking being Frankenstein in the 30s. And all of his other creaky shit, even Bela Lugosi's Dracula, the fucking Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman, these are not scary anymore. It's the fucking people. And honestly, Deep Rising has a fucking sea monster, but the people are far more shitty than the sea monster. It's like Jaws. It's like, fuck, kind of rooting for the fucking shark, because these people are fucking dumb and stupid. It's like, eat them up, yum, yum, eat them up. I don't give a fuck. It's one of those things. So that's it for this round. Stay tuned next week for the fourth round, which is going to be Bonnie and Clyde versus The Living End. So that should be interesting. And like I say, as usual, we'll have guests. One of these days, it could just be me talking through all these. I don't know. I changed my mind a lot. But here's the thing, though. Like I said, comment if I've said anything wrong or something you don't agree with, or fact check me. I don't care. Debate. This is the whole point of this. I want to rouse a debate about the 70s and the 90s, two of the greatest decades of all time. But I gotta know which one's better. And the only way I can do this is going through all these fucking double features that I got planned to see which one, it's gonna be great. But next week, Arthur Penn's Bonnie and Clyde versus Greg Araki's The Living End. So stay tuned for that.